The silence inside the grand wedding hall felt heavier than the music that had filled it only moments before. Rows of white roses lined the aisle, their delicate petals glowing beneath the crystal chandeliers suspended from the high ceiling. Every seat was occupied by family, friends, business associates, and respected guests from across Seoul, all waiting for a ceremony that was already beginning to unravel. At the end of the aisle stood Han Seo-yeon. She had spent months planning this day with the quiet confidence of a woman who believed she had finally found a place where her heart could rest. Every detail had been chosen with care, from the soft ivory gown that flowed gracefully around her to the handwritten vows hidden inside a small satin envelope in her bouquet. She smiled, believing the next few minutes would become the happiest memory of her life. She had no idea that before the ceremony even began, everything she believed about love was about to disappear. Every eye in the wedding hall turned toward the entrance. A quiet wave of anticipation swept through the guests as the heavy wooden doors opened inch by inch. Han Seo-yeon's heart quickened. She expected to see Kang Min-jun smiling back at her, ready to begin the future they had spent 3 years planning together. Instead, the smile slowly disappeared from her face. Min-jun walked inside. His tailored black tuxedo was immaculate. His expression, however, carried none of the joy of a groom about to be married. He never looked toward the altar. He never looked at Seo-yeon. His eyes remained fixed on the woman standing beside him. Han Ji-ah, Seo-yeon's younger sister. Ji-ah wore an elegant ivory dress, not a wedding gown, but close enough to make every whisper inside the hall grow louder. Their hands were tightly intertwined, as though letting go was no longer an option. The silence became unbearable. Confused glances turned into murmurs. Within seconds, the celebration had become a spectacle no one had expected to witness. The white rose landed softly on the polished marble floor. Its petals scattered across the aisle, unnoticed by everyone except Han Seo-yeon. For a brief moment, the entire wedding hall seemed to freeze. No one moved. No one spoke. The soft hum of the air conditioning became louder than the silence itself. Seo-yeon searched Min-jun's face, hoping this was some elaborate misunderstanding. A surprise. A mistake. Anything that would make sense of the nightmare unfolding before her. But there was nothing. No apology. No hesitation. No trace of the man who had once promised to spend the rest of his life with her. Standing beside him, Ji-ah gently leaned closer. The quiet confidence on her face said everything words never could. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. A choice they had made long before stepping into that wedding hall. And in that devastating instant, Seo-yeon realized she had been the only person who hadn't known the truth. Kang Min-jun finally raised his eyes. For the first time since entering the wedding hall, he looked directly at Han Seo-yeon. His face was pale. His jaw tightened as though every breath had become a burden. The confident lawyer who could command a courtroom now stood motionless before hundreds of people, unable to hide the weight pressing against his conscience. Seo-yeon searched his eyes for even the smallest trace of the man she had fallen in love with. She searched for regret, for hesitation, for the courage to admit this was all a terrible mistake. Instead, she found resignation. It was the expression of a man who had already made his decision long before today. Around them, the whispers spread through the wedding hall like ripples across still water. Guests lowered their phones. Parents exchanged uneasy glances. Even the wedding staff stood frozen, unsure whether the ceremony had ended or whether it had never truly begun. At the center of it all stood Seo-yeon, still wearing the wedding dress she had dreamed of since she was a little girl. still holding on to a future that had quietly slipped away before she ever reached the altar. The sound of Min Jun's polished shoes echoed through the silent wedding hall. One step. Then another. Each step felt painfully slow, as if time itself had decided to witness Seo Yeon's heartbreak. She didn't move. She couldn't. The bouquet had already slipped from her hands. Now, even the strength to look away had abandoned her. Min Jun stopped a few feet in front of her. The distance between them was barely enough for a few footsteps. Yet it felt like 5 years had already passed. His eyes were heavy with regret. But regret could no longer erase the countless evenings they had spent dreaming about this day, the promises they had whispered beneath Seal's glowing skyline, or the future they had built together in their hearts. Around them, cameras that had arrived to capture a wedding now captured something entirely different. A love story collapsing before it had the chance to begin. For the first time, Seo Yeon understood that some endings don't arrive with anger. They arrive with silence. And silence can be far more devastating. A chair scraped softly against the marble floor. The sound was enough to pull every wandering gaze toward the front row. Han Sang-ho, Seo Yeon's father, slowly rose to his feet. The proud smile that had remained on his face throughout the morning disappeared, replaced by quiet disbelief. Only minutes earlier, he had welcomed guests with gratitude, convinced he was about to watch his eldest daughter begin a beautiful new chapter. Now, he looked decades older. His eyes moved from Seo Yeon to Min Jun, then finally to Ji Ah. The daughter he had protected since childhood now stood beside the man who was meant to become part of their family. He searched their faces for an explanation, for a sign that this nightmare could still be undone. There was none. Around the hall, the whispers grew louder. Some guests lowered their eyes in sympathy. Others secretly recorded what they believed would become Seal's most unforgettable wedding scandal. The celebration had already become tomorrow's headline. But none of them noticed the quiet tear that rolled down Seo Yeon's father's cheek. It wasn't only a wedding that had fallen apart. His family was breaking apart in front of him. Han Sang-ho walked slowly toward the altar. Not as the respected businessman everyone in Seoul admired, but as a father whose heart was quietly falling apart. Each step echoed through the wedding hall. No one dared interrupt him. Even the photographers lowered their cameras. When he finally reached Seo Yeon, he didn't ask a single question. He simply looked at her. Her trembling hands. Her tear-filled eyes. The wedding dress she had dreamed of wearing since she was a little girl. He remembered teaching her how to ride a bicycle along the Han River. Watching her graduate from university. Holding her hand after her first heartbreak. He had always promised himself no one would ever make his daughter cry again. Yet today, the deepest wound hadn't come from a stranger. It had come from the two people she loved the most. Without saying a word, he gently removed his suit jacket and draped it over Seo Yeon's shoulders, almost as if he were trying to protect her from the hundreds of eyes staring at her broken heart. The wedding hall remained silent. But the simple gesture spoke louder than any speech ever could. The massive glass doors of the wedding hall slid open. A cool autumn breeze swept across Seo Yeon's face as she stepped outside. The sounds of the ceremony faded behind her, replaced by the distant hum of Seoul's afternoon traffic. Luxury sedans lined the entrance. Wedding guests slowly emerged from the building, whispering among themselves, but none dared approach her. Seo Yeon walked down the wide stone staircase without looking back. Every step carried her farther from the future she had imagined. She stopped beside a quiet reflecting pool outside the chapel. The water remained perfectly still. For the first time that day, she saw her own reflection. Not the confident bride who had entered the hall an hour earlier, but a woman whose life had been divided into two parts. Before the wedding, and after it. As she stared into the water, a black luxury sedan pulled quietly to the curb across the street. Its engine switched off. The driver's door opened. Someone had been watching everything from a distance. Not a guest. Not family. Not a journalist. Whoever had just arrived wasn't interested in the wedding. They had come for Seo Yeon. Across the street, the mysterious figure remained still. The traffic lights changed. Cars flowed through the intersection. Pedestrians hurried past without paying attention. Yet the stranger never took their eyes off Han Seo Yeon. After several quiet moments, they stepped out from beside the black sedan. A tall man dressed in a charcoal overcoat walked calmly toward her. His pace was unhurried. Not because he was uncertain, but because he had waited years for this moment. Seo Yeon sensed someone approaching and slowly lifted her eyes from the reflecting pool. The stranger stopped a respectful distance away. He didn't offer sympathy. He didn't apologize for interrupting her. Instead, he carefully placed a thick brown envelope on the stone bench beside the reflecting pool. Its surface carried only one line. To Han Seo Yeon, the truth about your wedding day. Before she could react, the man turned and walked away. He disappeared into the afternoon crowd as quietly as he had arrived. Seo Yeon stared at the envelope. Some instincts tell us to walk away. Others whisper that our lives are about to change forever. Without realizing it, she reached for it. Seo Yeon's fingertips tightened around the envelope. For several seconds, she simply stared at it. The city around her continued as though nothing had happened. Traffic flowed. A bus pulled away from the curb. People laughed as they crossed the street. Only her world had stopped. Taking a slow breath, she broke the seal. Inside were several photographs. Each one carefully arranged in chronological order. The first photograph was dated 8 months before the wedding. Seo Yeon's heartbeat quickened. It showed Kang Min-jun entering an upscale restaurant in Cheongdam-dong, one of Seoul's most exclusive neighborhoods. Nothing unusual. Until she looked closer. Walking beside him was Han Ji-ah. Not as a sister accompanying her future brother-in-law, but as a woman smiling at the man she loved. Their fingers were intertwined beneath the restaurant table. Across another photograph, Min-jun gently brushed a strand of hair away from Ji-ah's face. The date in the corner remained impossible to ignore. 8 months. 8 entire months before the wedding. This wasn't a mistake made at the altar. It wasn't a sudden decision. It had been a secret. Carefully protected. Carefully rehearsed. While Seo Yeon had been choosing flowers, they had been choosing each other. The photograph slipped from Seo Yeon's fingers, landing face up on the stone bench. She stared at it. Again. And again. Her breathing became uneven. This photograph wasn't taken inside the restaurant. It was taken from outside. From across the street. Far enough away that neither Min-jun nor Ji-ah had noticed. At the bottom corner, a tiny handwritten note caught her attention. Look behind them. Seo Yeon leaned closer. Her eyes moved past Min-jun. Past Ji-ah. Toward the restaurant window. Then she froze. Reflected in the glass. Was someone holding a camera? The photographer hadn't hidden their reflection. It was intentional. As if they wanted Seo Yeon to know. They had witnessed everything. Below the reflection was another handwritten sentence. I tried to warn you. Seo Yeon's chest tightened. Someone had known about the betrayal months before the wedding. Someone had watched it happen, photographed it, collected evidence, and remained silent. The question was no longer, why did Min Jun betray me? The real question had become, who was protecting them? And who was secretly trying to protect me? A cold breeze swept across the plaza. The remaining photographs fluttered across the stone pavement. Seo Yeon instinctively chased after them. One photograph stopped beneath a nearby bench. She bent down to pick it up. Then, she noticed a small silver USB drive taped to the back. Seo Yeon closed her hand around the tiny silver USB drive. For a moment, she felt exposed. The peaceful plaza outside the wedding hall suddenly seemed unfamiliar. She instinctively looked around. People were everywhere. A young couple laughed as they walked past. An elderly man fed pigeons beside the fountain. Office workers hurried toward the subway entrance. Everything appeared perfectly normal. Yet, someone had just left years of carefully hidden evidence in her hands. And now, someone else was watching. Without opening the USB drive, Seo Yeon slipped it into her handbag. She knew better than to examine something so important in a public place. Across the street stood a quiet cafe overlooking the Han River. Its tall glass windows reflected the afternoon sunlight, shielding the people inside from the busy city beyond. It was calm. Private. Exactly where she needed to be. Taking one last glance behind her, Seo Yeon crossed the street. She never noticed. A man seated inside a black SUV, parked 2 buildings away, slowly lowered his binoculars. He picked up his phone. Only 4 words left his lips. "She's opening it today." The call ended. The SUV pulled away before the traffic light turned green. The cafe was unusually quiet. Soft piano music drifted through the room while the afternoon sun reflected across the Han River beyond the glass windows. Seo Yeon chose the table furthest from everyone else. The waitress politely placed a cup of hot coffee beside her, before quietly walking away. For several moments, she simply stared at the small silver USB drive resting on the wooden table. It looked ordinary. Small enough to fit in the palm of her hand. Yet it carried the weight of answers she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. Taking a deep breath, she removed her laptop from her leather bag. The cafe suddenly felt colder. Her fingers hesitated above the USB port. Once she opened those files, there would be no returning to the life she had known. The screen illuminated. One folder appeared. Its name was simple. "If you're seeing this, they lied to you." Seo Yeon's heartbeat echoed in her ears. She clicked. Inside were dozens of files. Photographs. Audio recordings. Financial documents. Security footage. Then, one video file immediately caught her attention. Its title read, "The Night Before Your Wedding." She reached for the trackpad. Then stopped. Outside the cafe, a black umbrella paused beside the window. Someone was standing there, watching her. Seo Yeon's finger rested motionless above the trackpad. The video began to play. The footage was grainy. A timestamp in the corner read, 8:47 p.m. The night before the wedding. The camera overlooked the rooftop terrace of a luxury hotel in Gangnam, Seoul. The city lights stretched endlessly into the distance. A cold wind swept across the rooftop. Then, a familiar figure walked into view. Han Sang-ho, Seo Yeon's father. He wasn't alone. Standing opposite him was Kang Min-jun. The 2 men appeared deep in conversation. Seo Yeon instinctively turned up the volume. Their voices remained inaudible. Only the expressions on their faces told the story. Her father's posture was tense. Min Jun repeatedly lowered his head, unable to meet his eyes. Seconds later, Han Ji-ah stepped onto the rooftop. She joined them without hesitation. The three of them stood together. Long before the wedding ceremony, Seo Yeon's heart sank. If her father had met them the night before, then he had known something. Maybe not everything, but enough to arrange a private meeting. The recording ended abruptly. The screen faded to black. A single line of white text appeared. This is only the beginning. Before Seo Yeon could process what she had seen, her phone vibrated. An unknown number. One message. Leave the cafe immediately. Someone inside has been sent to take the USB. Seo Yeon's eyes slowly lifted from the screen. She looked around the cafe. The waitress was gone. The businessman reading a newspaper had disappeared. Only one customer remained. A man wearing a dark baseball cap quietly stood up and began walking toward her table. The man in the dark baseball cap walked with steady, deliberate steps. Not too fast. Not too slow. His eyes never left Seo Yeon. She calmly closed the laptop and slipped it into her leather bag. Without drawing attention to herself, she moved the USB drive from her handbag into the inner pocket of her father's suit jacket. If someone intended to steal it, they would search the obvious place first. The cafe's soft piano music continued to play. No one else seemed to notice the tension building inside the quiet room. The stranger stopped beside her table. He offered a polite smile. For a moment, he looked like any ordinary customer. Then he quietly placed his hand on the back of the empty chair opposite Seo Yeon. Without asking permission, he sat down. Seo Yeon's heartbeat remained steady. She had spent the last hour losing everything. Fear no longer controlled her. The stranger leaned forward slightly. His voice was calm, almost friendly. But his eyes carried no warmth. He wasn't there for coffee. He wasn't there to comfort her. He had come for one thing. The USB drive. Seo Yeon's eyes settled on the white envelope. She didn't reach for it. Not immediately. After everything that had happened today, trust had become the most dangerous thing in the world. The stranger slowly withdrew his hand. He wasn't forcing her. He simply waited. Outside the cafe, the afternoon sky had darkened. Clouds gathered over the Han River as a light rain began to fall, blurring the skyline beyond the glass. Seo Yeon finally picked up the envelope. It felt unusually light. Inside, there was only a single sheet of paper. No signature. No name. Just one sentence. Your wedding was only a distraction. Her eyes narrowed. She turned the page over. Nothing. Then another small object slipped onto the table. A security access card. Printed across it were the words, Hanseong Group. Seo Yeon's breathing slowed. That wasn't just another company. It was her father's company. The company he had spent 30 years building. The company he had promised would one day belong equally to both daughters. She looked up. The stranger was already standing. He adjusted his coat. Without another glance in her direction, he quietly walked toward the cafe exit. The bell above the door chimed once. By the time Seo Yeon reached the window, he had disappeared into the rain. She looked back at the access card lying on the table. The number engraved beneath the company logo read, B2, Archive Room. Some secrets had been hidden for years. And someone wanted her to find them. before someone else destroyed them forever. The taxi disappeared into the evening traffic. Han Seo-yeon stood motionless before the towering headquarters of Hanseong Group. 43 floors of glass and steel reflected the fading Seoul sunset. 4 years. This building had represented safety. It was where her father had built his reputation. Where she had spent school holidays waiting in his office after class. Where every employee greeted her with warmth. Tonight. It felt unfamiliar. Cold. Almost as if the building itself had been keeping secrets. Seo-yeon tightened her grip on the access card. The revolving doors opened automatically. The spacious marble lobby was quieter than usual. Only a few employees remained, finishing late meetings before heading home. The receptionist looked up. Her smile appeared. Then quickly faded. She recognized Seo-yeon immediately. News of the wedding had already spread across Seoul. The receptionist lowered her eyes with quiet sympathy. Seo-yeon offered a small, polite nod. She wasn't here to answer questions. She was here for answers. Without stopping at the reception desk, she walked toward the private executive elevators. The silver access card rested in her trembling hand. One soft beep echoed through the silent lobby. Access granted. The elevator doors slid open. Inside. There was no one. As the doors slowly closed behind her, the digital display skipped every executive floor. Instead, it stopped at only one destination. B2. The underground archive level. A floor that didn't appear on the company's public directory. The elevator came to a violent stop. The sudden jolt sent Seo-yeon stumbling forward, her hand instinctively gripping the polished steel rail. Then. Darkness. The cabin lights flickered twice before switching to a dim emergency glow. The silence was unsettling. Only the soft hum of the ventilation system remained. Seo-yeon pressed the emergency button. Nothing. She pressed it again. Still nothing. Her phone had no signal. She looked up at the digital floor display. Instead of showing a floor number, it displayed only 3 words. Access overridden. A chill ran down her spine. Someone hadn't merely interrupted the elevator. Someone inside Hanseong Group had complete control of the building's private security system. Then. A faint mechanical sound echoed above her. The elevator shuddered. Slowly. It began descending again. Not toward the basement. Past it. The display changed. B2. B3. Seo-yeon's eyes widened. She had never heard of a B3 level. According to every company directory, the building ended at B2. The elevator doors opened with a soft metallic chime. Cold air drifted into the cabin. Beyond the doors stretched a long concrete corridor illuminated by dim overhead lights. No company logos. No office signs. Only silence. At the far end of the corridor, a single steel door stood slightly open. Warm light spilled through the narrow gap. Someone was waiting inside. Seo-yeon froze. The unfamiliar voice echoed softly through the underground corridor. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't welcoming. It sounded like someone who had been expecting her for a very long time. She slowly pushed the heavy steel door open. The room beyond was nothing like an archive. It resembled a private intelligence office. Floor-to-ceiling shelves were lined with neatly labeled storage boxes. Large digital screens covered one wall. Several surveillance cameras displayed live feeds from different parts of Hanseong Group headquarters. The lobby. The executive offices. The underground parking garage. Even the elevator she had just stepped out of. Seo Yeon's pulse quickened. Someone had been watching every corner of the company. Standing beside a long wooden conference table was a man in his early 40s. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit without a tie. His neatly styled black hair showed faint streaks of silver near the temples. His calm expression carried the quiet confidence of someone who preferred observing over speaking. He didn't step closer. Instead, he picked up an old leather file from the table. The edges were worn from years of being opened and closed. He gently placed it in front of Seo Yeon. Across the cover, embossed in faded gold letters, were 4 words. Hanseong Group. Confidential succession file. Seo Yeon's breath caught. Succession. Her father had never mentioned preparing a succession file. The man finally looked directly into her eyes. His expression remained unreadable. Your wedding wasn't destroyed because someone stole your fiancé. He paused. It was destroyed because someone believed you were about to become the next chairwoman of Hanseong Group. The room fell silent. For the first time since leaving the wedding hall, Seo Yeon realized she had been asking the wrong question all along. This had never been a love story. Someone had turned it into a corporate war. The room fell into complete silence. Seo Yeon's eyes remained fixed on the family tree. A thick red line had been drawn across her father's name. Not with a pen, but digitally. Deliberately. As though someone had already decided he no longer existed. She slowly looked up. The mysterious man stood quietly beside the table. His expression revealed nothing. Without saying a word, he turned another page. It wasn't a family record. It was the official organizational chart of Hanseong Group. Chairman. Vice Chair. Executive Directors. Board members. Every important position had been highlighted. Several names were circled in red. Small handwritten notes filled the margins. Votes secured. Transfer complete. Phase 2 approved. Seo Yeon's chest tightened. This wasn't a business report. It was a plan. A carefully organized takeover. The man finally broke the silence. 3 years ago, someone inside this company realized Chairman Han intended to retire earlier than expected. He slid another document across the table. It was a confidential board meeting agenda. The meeting had been scheduled exactly 2 weeks after Seo Yeon's wedding. Her eyes widened. If the wedding had gone ahead, she would have attended that meeting as the chairman's future successor. Then everything became painfully clear. The wedding. The betrayal. The public humiliation. None of it had happened by chance. Someone needed Seo Yeon emotionally destroyed. Someone needed her too broken to step into Hanseong Group. And they had succeeded. For 5 long years, a sharp alarm pierced the silence. Every surveillance monitor instantly turned crimson. The mysterious man reacted without hesitation. His calm expression disappeared for the first time. He rushed to the control console and enlarged the live feed from the underground parking garage. Seo Yeon stepped closer. The high-definition camera revealed a black luxury sedan stopping beside the executive elevator. 3 men stepped out, all dressed in identical dark suits. Their movements were disciplined, deliberate, professional. They weren't employees. They moved like a team that had rehearsed this moment. One of them unfolded a photograph. Seo Yeon felt her heart stop. It was the same photograph taken outside the wedding hall. Only this time, someone had written across it, in bold red letters. Retrieve the file. Not. Find Seo Yeon. Not. Bring her back. Only one objective mattered. The file. The mysterious man quickly opened another surveillance feed. The men had already entered the executive elevator. He checked the floor indicator. His voice became noticeably lower. They've overridden the building's security. The elevator display skipped every executive floor. B1. B2. Then it stopped. B3. Seo Yeon slowly looked toward the steel door. For the first time, she realized this hidden room was no longer a safe place. The footsteps echoed through the underground corridor. Slow. Heavy. Getting closer. The mysterious man quietly closed the succession file. Then he slid it into Seo Yeon's hands. Whatever happens, don't let them take this. He walked toward the steel door, reached beneath the conference table, and pressed a hidden switch. A section of the concrete bookshelf silently slid open, revealing a narrow passage leading deeper beneath Hanseong Group. The pounding on the steel door grew louder. Bang. Bang. Dust drifted from the concrete ceiling with every impact. Director Choi remained perfectly still. His eyes never left the security monitor mounted beside the door. 3 armed men waited outside. One stood directly in front of the biometric scanner. Another quietly checked the corridor behind them. The third was speaking into an encrypted radio. This wasn't an ordinary search. Someone inside Hanseong Group had sent them with precise instructions. Director Choi turned to Seo Yeon. His voice was calm despite the growing danger. There isn't much time. He pointed toward the open passage hidden behind the moving bookshelf. This tunnel was built decades ago. It connects to the original headquarters, beneath the old district of Seoul. No one on the current board knows it still exists. Seo Yeon looked down at the succession file in her hands. The leather cover felt heavier than before. It no longer represented documents. It represented the truth. Outside, a metallic beep echoed through the corridor. The biometric lock had been bypassed. Director Choi glanced toward the steel door. They're in. Without another word, he grabbed a compact flashlight from a nearby cabinet and handed it to Seo Yeon. The hidden passage stretched into complete darkness. She hesitated for only a second. Then she stepped inside. The narrow tunnel was cold and silent. Concrete walls surrounded her. Old electrical cables ran along the ceiling. The air smelled of dust and forgotten history. Behind her, the steel door burst open with a deafening crash. Voices filled the archive room. Footsteps scattered in every direction. Director Choi had stayed behind. Not to fight, but to buy her time. Seo Yeon tightened her grip on the succession file and disappeared deeper into the underground passage. She didn't know where it would lead. But for the first time since her wedding day, she wasn't running from her past. She was running toward the truth. The heavy iron hatch closed behind Seo Yeon with a dull thud. For the first time in several minutes, the noise of pursuit disappeared. She stood inside a quiet Hanok courtyard tucked away in Bukshan Hanok village. Traditional tiled rooftops stretched into the evening mist. A gentle breeze stirred the bamboo trees. Wind chimes hanging beneath the wooden eaves chimed softly. It was hard to believe that only a few hundred meters away, Seoul's financial district was descending into chaos. Seo Yeon caught her breath. Then she noticed someone waiting beneath an ancient ginkgo tree. An elderly Korean woman. She wore a simple cream hanbok with a dark navy overcoat draped across her shoulders. Her silver hair was neatly tied back. She stood with quiet elegance, as if she had known exactly when Seo Yeon would arrive. Without speaking, the elderly woman poured a cup of warm tea. She gently pushed it across the low wooden table. Only then did she raise her eyes. They finally sent you. Seo Yeon's grip tightened around the succession file. You know who I am. The elderly woman gave a faint smile. I knew your mother. The words struck Seo Yeon like lightning. Her mother had passed away years ago. Her family rarely spoke about her. Even her father avoided the subject. Yet this stranger spoke her name. As though yesterday they had shared tea together. Seo Yeon's hands trembled as she picked up the faded photograph. Time had yellowed its edges. But the faces remained unmistakable. Her mother. Radiant in a simple white dress. Director Cho. Much younger, standing proudly beside her. And between them. A little Korean girl, no older than 8. She wasn't part of the Han family. Seo Yeon was certain of that. She would have remembered her. The elderly woman quietly sipped her tea before speaking. That photograph was taken 22 years ago. It was the day your mother made a promise. Seo Yeon looked up. A promise? The elderly woman nodded. She knew Hanseong Group would one day become dangerous. She believed power would tear the family apart. Seo Yeon lowered her eyes to the photograph again. On the back, someone had written a sentence in elegant handwriting. When the truth can no longer be hidden, find the girl in the photograph. Her breathing slowed. The girl. Who is Ki? The elderly woman remained silent for several seconds. Then, she answered quietly. She's the only living witness. The only person who knows what truly happened to your mother. A cold wind swept through the courtyard. The wind chimes rang softly beneath the wooden eaves. Seo Yeon felt the world shift beneath her feet. Her mother's death had never been a closed chapter. It was the beginning of a secret that had waited decades to surface. The quiet courtyard instantly felt different. The birds that had filled the air with gentle songs suddenly flew from the tiled rooftops. A sleek black Genesis sedan rolled to a silent stop outside the wooden gate. Its engine switched off. No one stepped out immediately. The elderly woman slowly stood. Her eyes never left the entrance. They found this place much sooner than I expected. Seo Yeon instinctively slipped the old photograph into the succession file. She carefully closed the leather cover. The elderly woman walked toward a weathered wooden bookshelf inside the tea house. She removed a small brass key hidden inside an antique porcelain vase. Returning to Seo Yeon, she placed the key gently into her palm. There is a safety deposit box at Seoul Central Bank. It belongs to your mother. Seo Yeon's eyes widened. My mother. The elderly woman nodded. She left strict instructions. No one was to open it. Unless you came for it, yourself. Before Seo Yeon could ask another question, a car door slammed shut outside. Then another. Heavy footsteps echoed across the stone pathway leading to the gate. The elderly woman's voice became firm. Listen carefully. The succession file tells you who betrayed your family. She gently pressed the brass key into Seo Yeon's hand. But what's inside that safety deposit box? We'll tell you why. The wooden gate creaked open. 3 sharply dressed men entered the courtyard. The man in front removed his black leather gloves. His cold eyes settled on Seo Yeon. Then, he gave a polite bow. Ms. Han. We've been looking for you. No one moved. The evening breeze carried the scent of rain through the quiet Hanok courtyard. Seo Yeon's eyes remained fixed on the gold-embossed document. The lead man carefully unfolded it. I was instructed to deliver this to you, personally. His tone was respectful. Not hostile. Not threatening. He stepped forward slowly and placed the document on the wooden tea table. The elderly woman watched him closely, but said nothing. Seo Yeon opened the first page. At the top was the Hanseong Group corporate seal. Beneath it, an emergency resolution approved by the chairman. The date caught her attention. 3 days before the wedding. She turned another page. Every executive director had signed it. Except one. The space beside the vice chairman's name was blank. Unsigned. As Seo Yeon continued reading, her breathing became heavier. The document wasn't about appointing a new chairperson. It was about protecting one. If Chairman Han became unable to perform his duties, all executive authority, voting rights, and control of the company would immediately transfer to Han Seo Yeon. Not after the wedding. Immediately. The room seemed to fall away beneath her. Everything suddenly made sense. The wedding had never been the prize. She was. The words echoed through the tea house. Chairman Han has collapsed. Seo Yeon's mind went blank. The emergency resolution slipped from her hands onto the wooden floor. No. It was barely a whisper. The lead man ended the call and looked at her with quiet urgency. The chairman collapsed during an emergency board meeting. He was taken to Seoul National University Hospital. The board has already been informed. The elderly woman slowly closed her eyes. So. It has begun. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Thunder rolled across the evening sky. Seo Yeon picked up the emergency resolution. She noticed one final handwritten sentence at the bottom of the last page. If this reaches Seo Yeon, trust no one on the board except Director Cho. Her father's handwriting. She recognized it immediately. A tear escaped despite her determination. Her father had known. He had prepared for this day. Not because he expected to lose the company, but because he expected someone to come after his family. The lead man stepped closer. We have less than 1 hour. The board will meet tonight. If you're not there, they'll declare the chairman permanently incapacitated. And once that happens, the company will legally pass into someone else's hands. Seo Yeon slowly wiped away her tears. The frightened bride who had walked into the wedding hall no longer existed. She carefully folded the emergency resolution, placed it inside the succession file, then looked directly at the 3 men. Her voice was calm, firm, resolute. Take me to the hospital. No one replied. They simply bowed. For the first time that day, they weren't protecting Chairman Han. They were following his successor. The convoy sped through the rain-soaked streets of Seoul. Red traffic lights turned green one after another. The vehicles never slowed. Inside the lead sedan, Seo Yeon sat silently. The succession file rested on her lap. She replayed every moment of the day. The wedding. The betrayal. The hidden archive. Director Cho. Her mother's photograph. The emergency resolution. It all pointed to one destination. Seoul National University Hospital. The convoy entered the hospital's underground parking garage. Before the car fully stopped, Seo Yeon stepped out. Doctors hurried through the brightly lit corridors. Nurses pushed emergency stretchers past waiting families. The atmosphere was tense. The lead man guided her toward the executive wing. As they approached the intensive care unit, they heard raised voices. Several members of Hanseong Group's board stood outside Chairman Han's private room. Their discussion stopped the moment Seo Yeon appeared. Some looked surprised. Others looked uncomfortable. One elderly board member stepped forward. Ms. Han. We didn't expect you. Seo Yeon met his gaze without hesitation. I wasn't invited. I came because this is my father. Silence followed. She walked past them. No one dared block her path. Through the glass window of the ICU, she finally saw him. Han Sang-ho. Lying motionless beneath the hospital lights. Connected to monitors. A ventilator quietly rising and falling beside him. For the first time since childhood, Seo Yeon felt completely helpless. Then, her eyes noticed something unusual. A nurse was quietly adjusting the IV medication. The dosage label hanging from the infusion bag didn't match the prescription chart at the foot of the bed. Seo Yeon's heart skipped. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Seo Yeon pushed open the ICU door. Stop. The nurse froze. Every eye in the room turned toward her. She pointed at the IV bag. That's not the medication prescribed for my father. For a brief moment, no one moved. Then the attending physician rushed forward, checked the label, and immediately looked at the prescription chart. His expression changed. Disconnect it now. Within seconds, the IV was removed. Hospital security entered the room. The nurse attempted to leave quietly. She didn't make it to the door. She was stopped. As the investigation began, the truth surfaced faster than anyone expected. The altered medication had been delivered under forged authorization. The order traced back to one of Hanseong Group's senior board members. The same man who had been pushing for an emergency transfer of power. That night, the boardroom became a crime scene instead of a meeting room. The succession file, the surveillance recordings, the financial records, and the evidence Director Choi had protected for years were finally presented. Every lie unraveled. Every hidden alliance collapsed. Kang Min-joon confessed that he had been blackmailed into keeping silent. Han Ji-ah admitted she had allowed greed and ambition to destroy her own family. The corrupt board members were arrested. Director Chwa's name was finally cleared. Days later, Chairman Han slowly opened his eyes. The first person he saw was Seo Yeon. He smiled weakly. I'm sorry. I should have trusted you sooner. Seo Yeon gently held his hand. We still have time. Outside the hospital. The first sunrise after the storm painted Seoul in soft gold. Weeks later, Seo Yeon stood in the lobby of Hanseong Group.